It was on April 19, 2000 when paramedics in Colorado rushed to a local residence to aid a girl who had stopped breathing. They had just barely restored a faint pulse before rushing her to the hospital and placing her on life support. Back at the residence, authorities suspected foul play and began their investigation. They found a pile of pillows and blankets with feces and vomit within them. A camera was nearby and had been recording the entire time. Investigators reviewed the footage from the camera. On the recording were 4 adults sitting on the child as she screamed for help, trapped underneath the bedding. No matter what excuses they had, the evidence was clear. These adults were killers, and the child's mother, who had witnessed the whole thing, was complacent. But why? And what was their intention? Law enforcement had to rewind to the beginning. In 1996, a nurse by the name of Jean Newmaker of North Carolina adopted 7-year-old Candace Tiara Elmore. Candace came from a broken home. She was the child of a teenage pregnancy, and her father was known for being violent. Their other children had been separated from their chaotic home and adopted into other families. Jean decided to adopt Candace, thinking she could take this girl who had been marred by a difficult family environment in order to give her a proper upbringing. In the following years, Jean fed her, bought her a bike, and enrolled her in swimming lessons, essentially giving her a proper childhood under a new name, Candace Elizabeth Newmaker. However, Candace was diagnosed with a reactive attachment disorder, which stunted the bond between the child and the adoptive mother. She threw hour-long tantrums, harmed animals, and started fires inside her home. Teachers claimed that she was obedient and hardworking at school, but when she returned home, her erratic, reactive side came out. Despite numerous attempts at rehabilitation, nothing seemed to work. So Jean brought Candace to 2 unlicensed therapists, Connell Watkins and Julie Ponder. They suggested that the girl be subjected to rebirthing, a pseudo-therapy procedure based on attachment therapy developed in the 1970s, but it was eventually condemned by professional organizations. Did you know that 1 in 8 Americans are on anti-anxiety medication? That's a quiet epidemic. Getting off benzodiazepines is clinically harder than getting off heroin. Some people taper for years and never fully recover. The thing helping thousands of people get free is a mushroom you've already seen your whole life, Amanita muscaria, with its red cap and white dots. It's an Alice in Wonderland, Mario, even early Christian art. Some researchers call it the Christ mushroom. Its active compound works on the same GABA receptors as benzos, but without the same dependency. People use it for sleep, focus, and heightened mood. Most Amanita products on shelves are counterfeit with untested chemicals. Amanitara was built to fix that. Founded by Christian Rasmussen, who used Amanita personally to get off benzos, it is now the #1 supplier, trusted by over 55,000 people. They carry Amanita, Blue Lotus, and more, all lab tested. As a true crime creator, I don't get the best sleep. My brain would just run through case files all night. I tried listening to Rain, but honestly, it just sounded like somebody was cooking up a serious breakfast. Then I found Amanitara and tried their Blue Lotus gummies, and that was the first time in a long time I actually had a good night's sleep. If any of this has your attention, whether you're curious about the benzo angle, looking for a cleaner lifestyle alternative, or just want to try the mushroom that's been hiding in every piece of mythology you grew up with, check out Amanitara. Use the link in the description, amanitara.com/unreal. Use code UNREAL22 at checkout for 22% off your first order. Ethically sourced, fair priced, link is below. On April 19th, Jean brought 10-year-old Candace to Evergreen, Colorado for her new therapy session. Taking place in Watkins' basement and recorded on videotape, Candace was wrapped in blankets simulating a womb. Meanwhile, pillows were placed atop of the girl, while 4 adults, those being the 2 therapists, alongside assistants Jack McDaniels and Brita St. Clair, began to sit on her. Their combined body weight was said to be 673 pounds in total. In comparison, Candace only weighed 70 pounds. Within the first minute, Candace reportedly talked about frightening nightmares she had the night prior. These involved falling from a 2-story building and, even more chillingly, being killed by her own mother. Despite her struggles and fearful recollections, the therapists were not fazed at all. Instead, they instructed her to imagine herself as a baby in the womb. The girl was being suffocated, and yet the adults kept telling her she had plenty of air to breathe, and that the only thing that she could do now was to wiggle her way out. Roughly 8 minutes in, Candace was shouting that she could not breathe. Watkins reportedly responded to this by saying, "Sometimes it takes 18 hours to be born." It was clear that neither she or the other adults present took what the child was saying seriously. 14 minutes in, Candace was reportedly apologizing, struggling to breathe, and calling out that they were pushing on her head. On numerous occasions, she could be heard saying, "I'm dying." In response, Ponder said, "Go ahead and die right now for real," possibly believing that this was simply an irrational fear or a challenge to overcome. Afterwards, Watkins interjected, "Just go ahead and die. It's easier. It takes a lot of courage to be born." By the 20-minute mark, Candace was reportedly begging for oxygen and had already warned that she was going to vomit and defecate. But that did not faze the adults one bit. Instead, they goaded the child, telling her to wallow in her own bodily fluids if that's what it took. Watkins allegedly said, "Stay in there with her own feces and vomit." Meanwhile, Ponder continued to imitate a loving mother by saying, "I'm so excited to have this baby. I'm waiting for you, to love you and to hold you." Roughly 30 minutes in, Ponder spoke to Candace but heard no response. Instead of checking on her, she repositioned herself atop of the girl and said that more pressure needed to be placed on her head. McDaniels reportedly took a pillow and pressed against Candace's face, but no one seemed to react when she reportedly whimpered. It was 40 minutes into the unbirthing session, and the child was weak and limp. Still, the therapists taunted her for being a twerp and a quitter. They continued to remind her that if she did not make her way out, she would be wallowing in her puke and poop. When they asked Candace if she wanted to be reborn, she simply replied, "No." This would be the last thing she would ever say. It was over an hour into the unbirthing therapy when the therapists decided to remove the blankets and pillows, only to find Candace laying lifeless among her own body waste. Her skin turned blue. She had stopped breathing. During the entire session, Jean Newmaker watched the events unfold on a monitor in the other room. It was only when she saw the state of her adopted daughter that she tried to offer help. After being rushed to the hospital by paramedics and placed on life support, 10-year-old Candace Newmaker was pronounced dead. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Law enforcement seized the videotape of the quack therapy session, and what they found was not just upsetting, it was harrowing. Not once did any of the therapists, assistants, or even the adoptive mother attempt to help Candace. This was not some spiritual reawakening for the child to experience, it was abuse. Following these events, Watkins and Ponder were both charged with reckless child abuse resulting in death, and were each sentenced to 16 years in prison. The other two adults who took part in the therapy and sat themselves atop of Candace were sentenced to 10 years probation, followed by 1,000 hours of required community service. As for Newmaker, the adoptive mother, she was handed a 4-year suspended sentence. Rebirthing as a treatment would be banned in the state of Colorado. The new law was named Candace's Law, in tribute to the troubled child. So, what happened to the tape that recorded the fringe therapy session that resulted in the death of a child? The footage was used in the court against the suspects involved, and a full transcript was released on public record. Nevertheless, following the court case and subsequent sentencing of those involved, it was decided that the footage never be released publicly. Candace's final moments may very well be held by authorities, but it will most likely remain another case of disturbing lost media. The unreleased biographical film Midnight Rider became infamous for a terrifying incident that occurred behind the scenes. Directed by Randall Miller, the indie film was to cover the life and career of Greg Allman, best known as the lead singer of the Allman Brothers Band. The film was to feature a dream sequence of a hospital bed situated on a railroad track in Wayne County, Georgia, where Allman would be laying. Initially, the scene was to be shot on the grass near the river and bridge, but Miller decided the shot would take place on the narrow bridge itself. Shooting for this scene began in Georgia on February 20th, 2014. and the lead actor, William Hurt, was instructed to lay barefoot. The crew was reportedly denied permission to record there by the railway operator CSX, but they went against these wishes and went ahead anyway. 27-year-old assistant Sarah Jones was but one of the few crew members present. She was excited for the opportunity to work with a prolific and talented actor like Hurt on her very first day of shooting. Surely, it must have felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hurt was concerned about whether the shoot was safe, but assistant director Hilary Swartz reassured him with a single word: yes. Even then, the actor claimed, "Someone's going to die now." Reluctantly, the shooting began. From afar, the crew were informed by a spotter that the train was heading down the track, charging at roughly 60 miles an hour. Everyone was warned they had about 60 seconds to relocate the bed and get to safety. The dream shot was immediately scrapped, and everyone began shouting at one another to drop the recording equipment. Hurt called out that there was no stopping the locomotive. Even when the train blared its horn out as a warning of its presence, the crew were scrambling to get out of its way. Jagged rocks jabbed at Hurt's feet as he desperately clambered off the bed and painfully stumbled away. Considering how narrow the bridge was, he tried to be mindful of everyone else around him as well. With little time to react, Jones latched on to the side of the bridge, mere centimeters from the tracks. The hospital bed could not be removed in time, and was struck by the train. Seven people were injured as a result of the accident. Joyce Gilliard, a hairstylist working with the team, had her arm severely broken when the wind and pressure flung it into the moving train. But that wasn't the worst of it all. When the bed was shattered, debris struck Jones and knocked her into the path of the moving train. Tragically, she would pass away on the spot. In court, Miller, alongside his wife and collaborator, Jody Savin, initially pleaded not guilty to involuntary slaughter. However, the director would accept a plea deal where he'd be jailed for 2 years, under probation for 8 years, and had to pay a $20,000 fine, so long as Savin was spared. Despite the tragedy, Miller attempted to push for the completion of the film. As a result, Hurt quit the project altogether, and Greg Allman himself prevented its revival by suing the director. The case was settled out of court, and the film was ultimately cancelled. While brief clips of raw on-set footage was publicized by some news outlets, the uncut footage remains unreleased. An edited version of the dream sequence for the film was never made publicly available, and will no doubt remain as such. What was intended to be an informative and entertaining biopic became a tragedy for many, and one that was entirely avoidable. Nonetheless, the accident sparked numerous safety campaigns and initiatives to guarantee safe working conditions for filmmakers, thereby imposing safety measures to ensure that an accident like this will hopefully never happen again. In Anchorage, Alaska, on April 10, 2019, 2 mushroom hunters stumbled across the body of a woman off Old Glen Highway. The body was severely decomposed, indicating that she had been murdered and abandoned some time ago. Identified as 52-year-old Native Alaskan Veronica Buchek, a homeless woman who struggled with drug addiction, her murder went unsolved. Whoever the killer was must have covered their tracks. 5 months later, railroad employees made a bone-chilling discovery near Seward Highway. It was the skeletal remains of yet another woman. DNA testing on the skeletal remains revealed that this second victim was 30-year-old Kathleen Jo Henry of Alaska, a homeless woman who came from a loving family and enjoyed writing poetry, but struggled with addiction. Once again, the killer meticulously covered their tracks, and it seemed as though this was about to become another cold case. On September 30th, 2019, a man in a black suit picked up a sex worker. The driver pulled up and walked over to an ATM, unaware that the woman had stolen his phone. After looking at its contents, she copied it to a stolen SD card and handed it to law enforcement. Labeled "Homicide at Midtown Marriott," its contents were quite simply barbaric. A man had recorded himself beating, stomping, and finally choking a victim to death in a hotel room, while remaining out of frame the entire time. A voice could be heard saying,
"In my movies, everybody dies. People need to know when they're being serial killed. I got the Oscar, bitch. You're alive, and you die. And you're alive, and you die.
It was clear that this was a snuff movie created by a twisted, self-centered individual who gained sick gratification from his terrible actions. Law enforcement reviewed the footage and recognized the victim as Kathleen Henry from the 12 videos and 39 photos related to her murder on the SD card. Her body was wrapped in a blanket, snuck out on a luggage cart, and taken to the murderer's vehicle. The location data of the phone revealed that the killer took a photo of the victim after dumping her near Seward Highway. In addition, they noticed a distinct nuance about the killer. He did not speak with an American accent. Rather, it sounded like a South African accent. Investigators recognized the man as Brian Smith, as he was one of the few men they knew from a previous undisclosed investigation who had that distinct accent. After reviewing photos on the SD card, detectives found images of the man beating and murdering Kathleen in a Midtown Marriott hotel room. They also discovered the images of the victim's ID in the room in question as well, 323. After analyzing Marriott check-in history, they discovered that Smith had been in room 323 on September 4th, 2019. On October 8th, 2019, upon returning to Anchorage after a vacation with his wife, Brian Smith was apprehended by law enforcement and brought him into custody. During the interrogation, Smith claimed innocence and that he had no involvement in the murder of Kathleen Jo Henry. So investigators shared photos extracted from the SD card to see what was enough for him to come clean.
There's a number of videos on there, and I brought some of the pictures to kind of go over with you about that. So this is one of the images on there. Part of it is kind of cut down a little bit, but can you tell me what's in that photo?
There's somebody's feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whose feet are those?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm looking at your shoes. I mean, it looks like the shoes you're wearing right now.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Okay. Is it safe to say those are your feet in that picture?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not the only person that's got shoes like this.
Okay.
I did recently buy these. I can't tell you when.
Okay, you can't tell me when. How long have you had them?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Where'd you buy them from?
These I would have got at Fred Meyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to show you some other images here that, and like I said, I've watched the videos and the images on there, and I've watched them multiple times, and that's why we're here. That's how I knew to talk to you. So these are just some of the other images on there.
Okay.
These are on the SD card.
Okay.
So what can you tell me about these photos?
This looks like someone that's already been beaten up a bit.
Okay. And these are images. These are images, but there's also videos of this person.
Yeah.
And another person in the room as well. And that's why we're here to talk to you about.
How many people in the room?
At least two.
Oh. Yeah.
So we need to address this. We need to clear this up.
Okay.
Mr. Smith.
After showing an image of a pair of feet that matched Smith's footwear, they shared an image of Kathleen's severely beaten body.
This looks like someone that's already been beaten up a bit.
Okay. And these are images. These are images, but there's also videos of this person.
Yeah.
And another person in the room as well. And that's why we're here to talk to you about.
How many people in the room?
At least two.
Oh. You think I hit this girl?
Well, like I said, there's videos of it. There's video of it, there's audio of it, there's a voice I've been talking to you now for almost 30, 40 minutes. And I know it was your voice I could hear in the video.
Okay.
Yet Smith continued to claim that he did not recognize what he was seeing. The investigators decided that it was time to bring up the most incriminating evidence in their disposal, a recording of the murder of Kathleen.
That sounds like me.
What's happening when that's... What's happening is on this video, on these images, the person that's recording it is holding the recorder and is standing basically above this girl and strangling her.
Okay.
And so we need to talk about this. We need to get ahead of this, Mr. Smith.
I don't want to act stupid, but I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything.
Okay. But this occurred, and like I said, the photos are timestamped. This occurred in that room 323, 323, on September 4th, early mornings,
Yeah.
at the time that you were at the hotel.
The 4th. I don't. I'm not denying. I'm not saying you're lying, but I don't remember anything like this.
Even when investigators played the footage aloud, he seemed to show no response whatsoever, outside of calmly describing the recording as crazy. These officers were not buying his confused demeanor. That voice sounded far too distinct to be anyone but Smith himself. The interrogation lasted well over an hour. As the questions continued and the evidence was shared with the suspect, Smith made an abrupt confession.
Whether you're going to share this with other people or you intended on it, I don't know. But you certainly intended on viewing it yourself. And you're clearly exerting power over this person. What do you think up until that point?
That girl's dying. It's my hand, ball.
No, it's not going to be very hard to figure. Like I said, this is when this gets on a 55-inch TV.
Yeah.
There's no voice in this one.
That's TV in the background.
Yep.
Hotel room TV.
Yeah. She's alive there.
Yeah, there.
It was in that moment he, perhaps involuntarily, admitted to killing Kathleen Henry, though he did not admit to kidnapping this woman that was a complete stranger to him, and yet he still continued to express disbelief.
You knew what you did in the SD card, and you had it in your head. You had that little bit of glim of light that maybe they haven't found that SD card, maybe they don't have that SD card, and they'll never tie that body over there to me. You had that little bit of hope, but then you were on the other side. You're like, but if they did, this is what I'm going to be ready. This is what I'm going to say. And
You clearly didn't know you were going to have your license plate in the photos, right?
Yeah, that's. I would not do. If I had to do something like this, I would not do that.
That's right. You wouldn't plan that this way.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly it wasn't planned.
Yeah.
It wasn't thought out very well. It was something that happened,
Yeah.
but it wasn't something that was planned. There was absolutely. You can tell
Yeah.
there's no planning on this.
Yeah. It's yes. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. This is someone who's an amateur. Doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, this is you.
And I'm cleverer than that.
you are. And so you would have never. You didn't need to lose that SD card. You didn't need for it to end up in our hands, because you know in your head that if we had never found that SD card, then we wouldn't even be here right now, would we?
Yeah.
But now you know. Now you realize that we do,
Mm.
and now you're trying to figure out how to get yourself out of it.
I can't get out of it. You got evidence. I'm going to the chair. There's. You
Right.
There's more than enough information.
So with everything that we have here, the smart Brian Smith is going to sit here and say, I remember everything except the time I picked her up and where, until the next day when this person just happens to be in the back of my truck, and I wait 2 days because I don't know what to do, and then I happen to just take a picture because I don't remember what I did. And I thought, well, I'll just take a picture of this dead person who I find in the back of my truck. No, this is you bolstering.
Yeah.
Just like you did with the drunk prostitute that you just had sex with that probably doesn't even know you had sex with her.
The amount of evidence against Smith was considerable. However, during a trip to the bathroom, the suspect made a stunning confession. Kathleen wasn't his only victim. In fact, he was involved with the death of Veronica Buchik, the very same woman who was found on Old Glen Highway back in April. Smith was brought back to the interrogation room so he could explain himself.
I picked up a very drunk girl. My wife was gone. She was away for the weekend. I had to go home. And I shot her. And I know you guys are doing the good cop, bad cop.
We're not really trying to do that. We're both pretty good cops, I think.
I say we're
Yeah,
really good. Yeah.
that's what I can't understand. You're both trying to be good. Who's the
Well,
bad?
we are just good. We don't do the good cop.
And,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. And everything you've done is, I really appreciate that.
He decided to recall in great detail what led up to Veronica's murder.
On that little side road going towards Butte, when you turn off the highway.
By the Luton power plant,
Yeah, around about that area now. You must have found her.
you may have. How long ago was that about?
Oh my God, 2, 3, maybe 3 years ago.
Three?
It was a long time ago.
During his recollection of events, he explained that he felt no emotion when he shot a Buchik with a SGS 22 caliber handgun while she was sitting on the couch. Investigators later recovered the contents of a deleted flash drive found at Smith's home, which reportedly included videos of Veronica before and after he shot her. While the detectives thanked the suspect for finally admitting to the crimes, he would then go on to share a chilling detail about himself.
Obviously, it's a second time, so there's something wrong with me. That's why I did it. You know that.
So you're struggling with that internally. You believe that there's something wrong with you that you could do this, and so you're struggling with.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not normal behavior. This, you know. I am in denial about this. This is the second one. I am in denial. I can tell you that.
Because it's much worse than.
Yeah, I don't want to believe that I can do something like that. I know I've done it, and that's why I can't see it in my head.
That you progressed from just shooting somebody to essentially torturing them before you killed them.
Yeah, and that's.
Ultimately, Smith was found guilty of numerous charges, including first and second degree murder, tampering with evidence, and sexual assault. On July 19th, 2024, he would be sentenced to a collective 226 years in prison. Both the killer and the footage he captured of his innocent victims will no doubt remain locked away for good.